ओम अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। वन्देऽहं श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवम् साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं श्रीकृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्ता नमोऽस्तुते। तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। नमो महावदान्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायिने कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नाम्ने गौरत्विषे नमः। पंचतत्वात्मकं कृष्णं भक्तरूपस्वरूपकं भक्तावतारं भक्ताख्यं नमामि भक्तशक्तिकम्। श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौरभक्तवृंदा। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। जन्माद्यस्य यतोऽन्वयादितरतश्चार्थेषु भिज्ञस्वराट् तेने ब्रह्म हृदय आदिकवये मुह्यन्ति यत्सूरयः। तेजो वारिमृदां यथा विनिमयो यत्र त्रिसर्गो मृषा धाम्ना स्वेन सदा निरस्तकुहकं सत्यं परं धीमहि। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। स्वस्ति अस्तु विश्वस्य खलः प्रसीदतां ध्यायन्तु भूतानि शिवं मिथो धिया। मनश्च भद्रं भजतादधोक्षजे आवेश्यतां नो मतिरप्यहेतुकी। Welcome to all of you for this morning talk on Sadhu Sangha and Sadhana in Bhakti Marga. Human life depends on association. We are product of our environment, our association, because our mind is influenced by its circumstances, the association we get. In psychology they have done research on this fact, and they have found that in the brain there are certain cells which they call as monkey cells or monkey neurons. So they have a tendency to imitate what they come in contact with. So we see this especially in children, that they like to imitate the parents, mother, father, whatever mother is doing, then the child also wants to do that. So this is natural because the brain is designed in this way. And when we grow up, we also have a tendency to imitate others, although it is not so visible to us, but actually most things we do, we are doing because others are doing it. And in this age of mass media and advertisement, most of our thoughts, our behavior, our lifestyle is influenced by what we see in the TV or magazines or internet. So even our style of the clothes we wear, hairstyle we put on, or what we want to be in our life, if you study it, then you will see that it is actually having a lot of influence from outside. So this fact was known before also, and in spiritual field, in spiritual life, therefore sadhu sangha was given much importance, because that also had an influence. And since our mind is influenced, then better to influence it in a spiritual way if we are interested in spiritual life. So those people who want to be expert in a particular field, then naturally it is good for them to associate with people of that field. If you want to be a sports person, then you associate with sportsmen. If you want to be a businessman, you associate with businessmen. Similarly, if you want to be a spiritualist, you associate with spiritualists. So that's what is called sadhu sangha. So sadhu means one who is advanced in spirituality. The definition of sadhu is given: mansi ekam, vachsi ekam, karmani ekam mahatmanam, mansi anyat, vachsi anyat, karmani anyat, duratmanam. It says a sadhu, a holy person, is one who has harmony between his or her thoughts, words and deeds. Means you act the way you speak and you speak the way you think. And the opposite of that is that you do opposite of what you say and you think differently. So that is called deception. That is called hypocrisy or cheating others. So that is also there in the life. But a sadhu is considered one who does not deceive others, one who is truthful. So that is, being truthful is the basic characteristic. Therefore the word sat is also used for sadhu. Sadbhave sadhu bhavecha sad sabd prayujyate. Krishna says that the word sat is used in sadbhav, in truthfulness, and also in sadhu. For a sadhu also you say satpurusha, and sat, from sat only the word saint comes in English, because the plural of sat in Sanskrit is santa, and from santa you have saint. So truthfulness is the foundation of dharma, religion, spirituality. And therefore a sadhu is one who is truthful, who does not have duplicity in his or her behavior. Sadhu does not mean that somebody is dressed in a particular way, because dress anybody can put on. Somebody in America, maybe you are familiar with that, he did an experiment. You can actually watch it on YouTube. It is Kumare Guru. You are aware of that Kumare Guru? So this one fellow, Indian, I think Gujarati, born in America to an Indian family. So from his very childhood, the parents were always taking him to the temple and making him participate in religious ceremonies, but he was not interested. But because parents were telling him to do that, so he was doing. He will go to the temple, there were congregations, some sadhu is giving a lecture, he is also sitting with the parents, but he was not into it. But he has his grandmother who was always doing some puja and reciting, and he noticed that whenever she is doing the puja and reciting some stotras, Vishnu Sahasranam, then she is very peaceful and calm and composed. So this actually impressed him, and he could not forget this. So when he grew up in America as a youth, then he was in college, school, doing what others were doing. But he got into this, that is spirituality, does it have some reality in it, or it just that people follow it, just like that. So he went to somewhere in Arizona or Texas, far away place. He was on East Coast somewhere, and I think with him he took 2 girls, and he posed as a guru. He had some big house there, and he declared himself as Kumare Guru. And then he was doing some yoga there, and he had these 2 girls who were also expert in yoga, and people started coming to him. He was doing some funny things to them and giving them some mantras, which were not mantras, just composed, made up something like that. And then people were following that, and they were having some experience. And he got a little bit of following, and he was videoing everything just to show that. So of course his idea was that these things don't have much in it, and even if you do it, like I'm not a guru and they're following and still they're having experience. So his analysis is different, but our analysis is that these people, they believed in him. And because they believed and they followed certain process, so they realized. And they got influenced by him, because whether he was inside fake or not, but at least he was posing like a guru. And externally he was doing it quite good. Because when you have to act, you do better than the original. Even original person doesn't have to show it, but in acting you have to show, so you do better than that. Because there was, when Charlie Chaplin was there in UK, so they made a competition that who can act just like Charlie Chaplin. So there was a national competition in that at different places, and then people were selected, and then there was a final competition. So Charlie Chaplin also participated in that without telling people that he's also there in it, because everybody was dressed like him, so who knows everybody looked Charlie Chaplin. So in the final competition he came third. And when he came third, then he revealed that actually I am Charlie Chaplin. So everybody was surprised that these guys are doing better than him. Because when you act, he was not acting, he was just himself. And the other people were making a good show, so they did better than him. So therefore Kumare Guru, he did better than the other gurus, because he has to act. So he got followers, and then of course he made a movie out of it, just to show this. So the point of this, and what I'm mentioning here, is that is because people come in association, then they become influenced by that. So therefore in Indian culture, Sadhu Sangha was given a lot of importance. And they had name for it, Satsanga, Sadhu Sangha, or also Darshan, Sadhu Darshan. So people used to go and just see a sadhu, even if they don't have any questions. It just became a custom. Then you go and you meet a sadhu, you sit with him, because even sitting makes some impact on the mind. Your thoughts become influenced. Just as you go and meet some persons, sometimes you feel just good. You get a nice feeling being with some people, and with other people you may feel irritated, although the other person is not doing anything to you. It is because our mind does get influenced by the association. So there are gurus, and there were gurus who were not speaking much. Even now in India there are some gurus, they keep Mauna Vrata. They keep silence, they don't talk. And still people go to them and sit with them, and just by sitting with them and being in their vicinity, they feel some satisfaction. They feel some change in their heart. So why it is? Because they also have their aura and their mindset which influences them. There are many stories like this, that you have some questions to ask. You go to a guru, by the time you go to him, your questions disappear. They are like answered. Or he may say something and that answers your question. Even before you ask the question, he may be just saying something to you or to somebody else, and you get the answer from that. So therefore Sadhu Darshan was, or Sadhu Sangha was very important. And in the scriptures there are many stories about the association of the sadhus. Because our spiritual life actually begins with Sadhu Sangha. If anybody takes ever to any spiritual path, any spiritual practice, then it is only by the holy association. Whether it is in this life or in the past life, it does not matter. Because sometimes some children are born who are of religious bent. So that of course they are carrying their samskaras, their impressions, their karma from the past life. But without sadhu's association, without the grace of a sadhu, one does not become spiritually inclined. Because our mind, our senses, they are naturally inclined towards material objects, material pleasures, because mind is material. So it is naturally inclined to material things. It does not have a spiritual inclination by nature. That is imposed on it. And that is imposed by Sadhu Sangha. So therefore, Sadhu Sangha is the key. And if it is available, then one should not leave that opportunity. And we should actually strive for it, wherever you can get. So in India, now Kumbh Mela is going on. Those of you are familiar with it. So the original purpose of Kumbh Mela was also Sadhu Sangha. That sadhus from all over India, they assemble there at one place. And then common people also go there. So if you have to meet sadhus, you may have to go to some different ashrams or remote places. You may not even know that there are sadhus existing like that. But in Kumbh Mela, all sadhus come. It's just a custom. Those sadhus who actually don't go anywhere, they also come to Kumbh Mela. So then people go and have their darshan, listen to their talks, get their blessings. So this was actually the real purpose behind it. And not that it was meant for some entertainment. Now, a lot of entertainment also happens there. Some people just go to enjoy. But the original purpose was different. So, it is by the association of sadhu that one gets faith in spiritual path. One gets desire for spiritual path. So just as you get material desires by material association, you watch advertisements, then you get desire to buy that product. Without advertisement, you may not have the desire. So although we may think that it is my desire, But actually this desire has been put into your mind by them. Once it comes into your mind, you think it is your desire, and then you become very attached to that desire and you want to fulfill that. But actually somebody else has placed it quietly without you knowing it. So this is what manufacturing companies do. They advertise, and their idea is to give you the desire to buy their product. So that is also association. So in the same way, the spiritual desire comes by spiritual association. And spiritual desire is that which actually makes our life happy, makes us free from the conditioning of the material world. Material desires, they don't have any end. They keep coming one after another. You have one desire, then another desire, and now you don't even have to make any effort for desire. The desires, there's so much going on around us that you cannot avoid it. There are many people who are working very hard, spending millions of dollars to have your desire. So they won't let you become free from desires. And you remain busy. So that is their purpose. That is their interest. Their interest is business. So sadhu's business, sadhu's purpose is to give enlightenment to people, because the desires of the material world, they are not giving satisfaction to us. Rather, they make us conditioned, they make us bound, and we lose our life in this process. Ultimately, there is not much which we gain from it. Therefore, it is said that a moment's association with a sadhu is more precious than living in heaven for millions of years, because you can live in heaven for millions of years till you remain conditioned. But sadhu's association for a moment can change your heart, can change your mind, and can put you on the path of spirituality. In Bhagavatam, in the very beginning, therefore, there is a story of Narada. Narada was speaking to Vyasa, who is the author of Vedanta Sutra, author of Mahabharata, author of the Upanishads, who divided Veda into 4. So there he is telling to Vyasa that how he became such a great sage. He said that in his past life he was son of a maidservant, and his mother used to go and do some work in the house of a Brahmana, and once some sadhus came and stayed at his house. In India, the custom was that the renounced sadhus, the sannyasis, they used to follow Chaturmasya Vrat, that for 4 months in the rainy season they will not travel. Otherwise, sannyasis used to travel from place to place. So they will sit down in one place. So they stayed at his house. His house, there was some garden, so they camped there for 4 months. And this was also a way of giving association to people. So all the village people were coming to them and they were speaking about Krishna and his philosophy of bhakti to devotees. And Narada, as a young boy, he was also tagging behind his mother. So when mother was doing some work in the house, he will sit down and listen to the sadhus. And although he was just a young boy, did not understand much, but he became very interested in hearing them. He would sit very quietly and pay great attention to what they were saying. And he became very attached to that. He understood that this is what I want to be. So when the sadhus were leaving, he wanted to go with them. So they said that no, you don't come because you have your mother, and if you come with us, then she will feel very sad. So they gave him mantra, they gave him diksha, they initiated him, and he said, you just chant this. So Narada, he began chanting at the young age of 5 years. And it so happened that one day his mother was going to do work in the house of the Brahmana early morning, and she accidentally stepped on a snake, and the snake bit her and she died. So when Narada came to know this, he became very happy. Usually a child, mother dies, will be crying. But he became happy, he thought that now actually I am free to follow my path. My mother was very attached to me, and because of that I could not go with the sadhus. Now that attachment is gone, this is God's grace on me. Somebody's mother dies, you think it is a curse on him. He was thinking this is a grace. So then he walked away from his house and he traveled to the Himalayas, and then he began very intense practice of bhakti, chanting of mantra, meditating on God. And finally he had darshan of God. God appeared to him. And then when he died in that particular life, after that he got a spiritual form and became this great sage Narada. He was born as son of Brahma. And God personally gave him the veena, which he always plays. So now he is traveling, he is still alive, and he goes on enlightening people. So there he describes the importance of sadhu sangha, and how by the association, otherwise a young boy, what does he know about spiritual life? So sadhu sangha is so powerful that it can influence even young children. So there is a story in India, I heard that there was a thief, and he was a very famous thief. He was also training his son to become thief. This was his family business. So he didn't want that his family business comes to an end. So he had a son. When the son grew up, he was also training him and telling him how you have to steal. So one day he told him that I give you one instruction and you remember it, that never listen to a sadhu. He says, if you ever listen to a sadhu, then your business will be finished. He says, these guys will destroy your business. So keep distance from them. He says, don't even go near them. They are the biggest danger to your trade. So he remembered it. In due course of time, his father died. He grew up. He became a very big thief. And he never got caught. So once he stole from the king palace, from the treasury of the king. And he was successful. So when king came to know that there is a theft in his own treasury, he was very upset. He said, if thieves can come and steal from my treasury, then how common man can be safe from thieves? And what is the use of me being king? So therefore he was very angry. He called his policeman and he said that I want within 1 week this thief who has stolen to be caught and to be hanged. And he declared in the kingdom that anybody who will give any information will be highly rewarded. So this thief also heard, and he also knew that now his life is in danger. So he lied completely low. Because usually what happens that when you get big money from robbery or theft, then these people go and enjoy. They go to restaurants, they go to bars, hotels, picnic resorts and enjoy because they got money and that's what they do with it. But he completely hid everything. He was hardly even coming out of his house, behaving as if he is sick. So the police, they were searching, going around and trying to, of course, know who are the famous thieves in the area so that they can go and interview them or try to investigate. So they also came to know about this particular thief, that he is also a thief. Somebody told him, although he was hiding very much. So they came and also interviewed him and they took him to the police station, they kept him there and they used all their technique to get information from him. But he said, no, I have not done anything. He says, my father was thief, but I am not a thief. So the power of a thief is in telling lies. So Chauranam Anritam Balam. Chanakya, in his Niti Shastra, book of polity, he says that Balanam Rodhanam Balam, that the strength of a child is in crying. A little child cries, the whole family pays attention. So this is the power of the child. The power of thief is in telling lies. More expertly you can tell lies, safer you are. So he was very good at it. He could even defy the lie detector. So the police people, they left him, they tried to threaten him, beat him up, but he says, you can kill me, but I have not done it, what can I do? My father used to do it. If you want to punish me for that, please go ahead. But I am not a thief. My father is dead. He has done theft. I am not telling lies, I am telling you the truth. I am accepting that my father was a thief, but I am not a thief. Why I am not a thief? Because I have seen he was always in trouble because of this. And I don't want to live such a life. So he was actually lecturing against stealing. So the police people, they let him off. What can they do? Can't force somebody to accept a crime which he has not done. So they tried very hard, but all the pointers were indicating that this is the fellow who has done it. But they also saw that he is not also displaying anything, because they were also watching him, that what are his movements, how is he spending his money, but they saw that he is not his normal as he was before. There is no change. But still they could not believe that he has not done it, because their doubt was very strong on him. So one police, and the date was coming closer, because the then king was every day calling the police chief and he said, so what is the progress? And he didn't have anything. So as time approached, he says, if you don't find it, then I am going to hang you. Because what you guys are doing, your job is to give protection to people, and you cannot even protect my treasury, so why shall I pay you? So now he was in big trouble. So he devised a technique somehow to catch this fellow. This thief was a devotee of Durga, because thieves usually worship Durga Ma. And whenever he got a big booty, then he will go to the temple and he will make an offering there. Before he went to steal, he will pray. But this time he never went to the temple. After he stole, he did not go to the temple. So this also everybody noticed, those who knew him, the police, they knew the movement, because police people, they know also how the criminals move. There is a joke in India that the most efficient police in the world is Indian police. Why is that? It says in other places the police knows about the crime after it is done. In India they know it before. Because most criminals, they, their friendship with the police, they already bribe them in advance. So this policeman, what he did, he devised a technique. He hired a woman and he said that you dress up like Durga and at night you go to this man's house and knock, and when he opens you say that I am Durga. How is it that you have stolen so much money from the king and you never came to make an offering to me? So this guy, then he will feel scared that actually it is a fact, because every time I steal I go to the temple, but this time I did not go. So then he may blurt it out that I am sorry and I will come tomorrow, and then we will catch him. So this was the technique to catch this fellow. So this lady, he trained her what she has to say and how she has to dress up. So at night she came dressed up like Durga and knocked at the door, and this thief opened, and suddenly he sees that Durga Ma is standing there. He falls on the ground and he says, "Oh Ma, I'm so grateful to you, and what can I do for you? How is that you have blessed me at my house?" So she said, "My child, listen. I know that you have stolen. Nothing is hidden from me. I know the heart of people. But why is that you have not come to make an offering?" So when she said this, now this guy thought, wow, what can I say now? She already knows this. So what has happened that once he was walking and he was going from one village to another village. So he was passing one village. Outside the village, under a big banyan tree, in India we have these big banyan trees, one sadhu was sitting and he was giving a discourse. So he has to pass by. So when he has to go from there, he remembered the statement of his father that never listen to a sadhu. So he has to go, there was no other path to go, so he said, I have to go. So he thought that I will close my ears and I will pass by, so that I don't hear anything what he is saying. So he did that, but before he closed his ears, he heard one statement of the sadhu. And the statement was that these divine beings, they don't cast shadow. And they don't touch the ground. So in the Puranas also it is written that the higher beings, if they come, then their bodies they may look like ours, but their bodies don't cast shadow. So suddenly he remembered this statement and he saw that there was a moon. So the moonlight was there and the Devi who was standing, there was a shadow of the Devi. So immediately he remembered that this sadhu said this, and then he thought that this means she is fake. So when this struck him, then he immediately said, "No, mother, I think you are mistaken. I have not done any theft. And you know it very well that whenever I do theft, whenever I steal, first thing I do is I make an offering to you. And if I had done it, why would I not make an offering to you? I am not such a miser. I may not give to others, but you are my worshipable. I always do that. So you somehow are mistaking me for somebody else. So Devi, of course, was saying, no, how can you say you think I'm wrong? How can I be wrong? So he says, Mother, I don't want to contradict you. If you want to punish me, you can punish me, but I humbly offer my words to you that I am not, this one I have not done. I have already been interrogated by police, they have already beaten me up, you can see the marks in my back. This is my fate somehow, and I beg you to please bless me and let me not be unnecessarily troubled for something which I have not done. So then this Devi, what could she do? She says, okay, but why you are not coming to my temple? So he says, I am not coming to your temple because I am afraid that these people will unnecessarily catch me thinking I have done and I am coming to offer it. Therefore I am just waiting, but don't worry, I will come tomorrow. So then Devi left and he had a sigh of relief. But then he thought, my God, just one statement of sadhu saved me. What if I really hear them? So then he went to that village and he started listening to that sadhu, and of course that stopped his business. As the father has predicted, he sold his house, everything, packed up and became a follower of this man and took spirituality full time. So this is a story to just to demonstrate that how the words of sadhu can change one's life. And that's why sadhu sangha was given so much importance. So especially on the path of bhakti, which also we are supposed to discuss and talk, sadhu sangha is considered as the first step, because only by associating with the sadhu one gets faith, shraddha in the process. And then one gets shraddha, then one becomes inspired to follow the process. So in the history there are various examples how even some criminal people, they became transformed by the association of sadhu. There is a story in the history of Lord Buddha. Lord Buddha, when he became enlightened, then he used to travel from village to village and preach. And at that time there was a very famous dacoit. His name was Angulimal. Anguli means finger and mal means garland, mala. So he got this name Angulimal because he used to kill people and then cut the finger and put it inside his garland which he was hanging, because he has taken the vow that he will kill 1,000 people. So just to keep count, he was keeping their finger. And he was very notorious and ferocious. People were very scared of him because he killed so many people. He was living inside the forest and the king even put a guard where the forest began so that nobody enters that forest because the life is dangerous, and where to search him in the forest. So once Buddha was walking and he wanted to go from one village to another village, crossing through the forest. So when he came near the forest, then the guard, they warned him that please do not go inside because it's very dangerous. So he said, what is the danger? So he said, there is this robber, this dacoit, Angulimal. So Buddha said, but I have nothing. What can he rob from me? So he says, no, there is not that he only robs, but he can also kill. So Buddha said, nobody can kill me because I am immortal. I am not this body. So how can he kill me? So he says, well, my duty is to warn you. You are a holy man. I feel pity for you that you will be killed by this man. So Buddha said, don't worry, for me, I am safe. So he walked. And when he was walking, then this Angulimal was a little far away. He saw him coming. And he thought, okay, I got another one to add to my garland. So he shouted from there, he said, stop. Buddha, he did not stop. He continued walking. He was walking as if nothing had happened, without any care, without any fear. So when he saw that, he said, this man is he deaf or what? Because anybody hears my voice, they start trembling. And they start to run or protect. This guy is just walking as if he has not heard me. So he shouted again. He said, stop, stop. So Buddha looked towards him. He did not stop. He continued walking. So then this dacoit became very angry. He says, this fellow is not afraid of me. And he's not stopping. He's even insulting me. So he came running to him and he had a sword in his hand, pulled out. So he came behind him and he said, stop, I'm asking you to stop. Why don't you stop? So Buddha, in a very peaceful manner, without any fear, he turned his head towards him and he looked into his eyes. He said, I have stopped. When will you stop? So this guy, this Anguliman, he was completely surprised that somebody can dare to look into my eyes and speak and question me. And the way he looked at him with great compassion, and how his face was so serene, this just did something to his heart. And he was just hearing this sound in his ears. I have stopped, when will you stop? I have stopped, when will you stop? And when he was just hearing, the sword dropped from his hand. And he fell at his feet, he went down on his knees. And he says, who are you? I've never met anybody like you. And people are always trembling in fear from me, but you have no fear. So he says, I have no fear and I can also make you free from fear. You think people fear from you, but you are also full of fear. So first he thought that how can I be full of fear? So Buddha said, if you don't have fear, why are you living here in the forest? Why don't you come and live in the village? Let's see if you don't have fear. Why are you carrying this sword? I don't carry sword with me. And I'm not afraid of you. Can you walk without sword? So the man said, no. I cannot walk because my life will be in danger. So I said, so you are full of fear, right? He said, yes. So he says, now you stop. So he said, stop what? So he said, stop killing. So he said, how can I do that? So he says, you do one thing. Go to this tree and get one leaf. So he went, because now this guy is some very strange fellow. Now he is asking him to get a leaf. So he says, pluck one leaf from the tree. So this Angulimal, he went and he plucked a leaf. So he says, yes. So he says, you see this leaf? He says, yes. He says, where was this? He says, it was on the tree. So he says, now you go and put it back. So he says, what are you asking? I cannot do that. So he says if you cannot put the leaf back, then you also don't have the right to break it. You cannot bring life back, you don't have the right to kill. So he says, now you throw away this sword and just follow me. So this is sadhu sangha. And just one statement changed his whole heart. Otherwise you try to convince him in any other way, he will not listen. So this is the greatness of association of holy people, and thus we should strive for that if we want a change in our life. And of course change can be good or bad, but spirituality is that which brings real happiness in your life, which we are all looking for. So bhakti specifically begins with sadhu sangha, as Rupa Goswami, while defining the path of bhakti, says, Ado shraddha tato sadhu sangha tato bhajan kriya tato anarth nivritti syat tato ruchis tato atha shakti bhavas tata. So he says that you have sadhu sangha, you get shraddha, faith, and then you seek more sadhu sangha, because when you have faith, then you want more. That is the meaning of faith. You like it. And then you take to the process. Bhajan kriya means the process of devotion. And that removes your impurities from the heart. And impurities are basically the desires, unnecessary desires. We have basic needs for our survival, for our existence, but there are so many desires we harbor in our mind which are meaningless, and there is no end to those desires. There is no end how much money you can have, and no matter how much you have, it will look to you that I still need more. It will never be enough unless you yourself decide that okay, this is enough. It won't happen. There will be always something which keep coming that actually I need more now for this, now for this, now for this. And you keep on moving from one desire to another desire. And every desire is a disturbance to the mind. Mind by nature is peaceful. Just like in this room, if we don't make any sound, any noise, then room will be peaceful, right? Peace is not something which we have to create. What we can create is noise. We cannot create peace. Peace is already there. So what we do is we create disturbance. And then people come to us, they say, please tell me how to get peace. Many times people come and say, please tell me, Babaji, how to get peace. So I ask, how did you lose it? Because you must have done something to lose it. A child is born, child is peaceful, right? Child drinks milk and then sleeps, very peaceful. As he grows, then desires start coming. And that is the disturbance. So mind is peaceful if there are no desires in it. If you remove the desires from the mind, then it's peaceful. So every desire is a disturbance. So more desires, more disturbance. It's very simple. So peace is not somewhere. Sometimes people go, I'm going there for peace. I will go and live in the forest for peace. I will go into the mountain for peace. No, peace is not in the mountain. Because there are many people who live on the mountain. And they are not peaceful. They are thinking, I want to go to Johannesburg. So peace is not in some specific place or anything. Peace and disturbance they are function of your own mind. And wherever you go, you will carry your mind with you. It is not possible that you can go without the mind. So you will carry your disease with you. You can go to forest. Just because the atmosphere has changed, you feel peaceful a little bit because you become absorbed in seeing things. But the inside will again come back. If you live there long enough, then the same story starts repeating. So we have to cure this mind, and sadhana is done for that. So whether it is bhakti sadhana or yoga sadhana or jnana sadhana, it is all related to the mind. And that we don't teach to our children. And children also don't want to learn it because they think they are more clever than the parents. Somehow the parents, they could not make it, we will do it because we are smart. Right? We are born in 21st century. They were born in 20th century. How can they be more smart than us? Smart people are born in 21st century. So the children think these days that they are more intelligent than the parents. And parents, they don't know, but we will become happy. So they don't want to listen. If you tell them anything like you do some meditation, do some chanting, japa, no, why you have to do this? So it is not that God is going to benefit by your devotion or by your chanting. People wrongly think that it is God who wants it. God is not in need of anything. He is already playing his flute. So if you also want to play flute happily, then you go to him. But if you want disturbance, then there is plenty available, free. In fact, we are paying for disturbance. We go to club, we go to party, we pay for it. Then we disturb our mind, come back. Then we have to go again to get disturbed. We get used to disturbance. If we are not disturbed, we think something is wrong. Why am I not disturbed? We have gone so much away from peace now that peace scares us. If we leave you in a peaceful atmosphere, then you want something to disturb you. You cannot stay. If we ask you sit down here for 1 hour and just chant Mahamantra, you cannot do that. Then immediately you have to find something for disturbance. So we have become, sometimes people become accustomed to disease if they don't want to become healthy. Because becoming sick also has some advantages. You can get sick leave. Even when people are not sick, they say, I am sick. So being sick has some advantage, right? If without getting sick, you can get sick leave, imagine you get sick, what you will get? Probably you will get pension. So people want to sometimes fall sick because when you are sick, then people pay attention to you. Everybody is sending a message to you, asking you, calling you, writing to you. You become the center of attraction. So occasionally we fall sick and we need attention from people. Then mind will find some way to make you sick. If you are needing attention, and you are not getting it, then mind will create some disease. Because diseases come from mind. So then when you are sick and everybody is asking for your health, you feel happy. And if some big person comes to ask for your well-being, then you even feel great, you even tell, he came to ask. That minister phoned me asking how is your health. So we even feel great by falling sick. So these are the tricks of the mind. So of course this is not a happy state of mind. Like people who are in the mental hospital, they also look happy, right? If you have ever been to mental hospital, these people look very happy. They have no worries. They will be smiling for nothing. They may be talking when there is nobody and they are laughing. So we don't want to be like that. We are not looking for such happiness. So this type of happiness which people now are involved in, this is a diseased state of mind. Anybody who is free from this disease does not want such. So therefore spirituality, sadhana, it makes you healthy. Then only you experience the joy of life. Otherwise we don't even have an idea what is life, what is joy. Like a machine we work. Only thing is that we think that we are happy. And mostly we are in trouble. We are in anxiety, we are full of stress. So if you want to experience the real joy of your life, then you experience it by practicing spirituality. So I am telling this because I have experienced both. Otherwise you may say that why we have to believe you, right? You are just trying to increase your group. People like to have more in their own group. So everybody wants that your group has more members. So people may think like that. No, it's not. So just as God does not have to gain from your spirituality or non-spirituality, He is happy. But still He comes to teach. He gives the message of Bhagavad Gita. He gives the message of the Vedas, of the Upanishads, so that we can learn about our own life, about our own self, which we are not taught anywhere, and which is necessary. Because you may say, well, why do I need it? You need it because you have to live. You cannot say that I don't need to live. Everybody is living. So you have a choice whether you want to live in ignorance about your own life or you want to have knowledge and then live. Right? So this knowledge is what is given in scriptures. They teach you. Without scriptures are like our eyes. Without that scriptural knowledge, we are blind. Then we just follow the masses. Whatever is being told to us, and it is told in a very subtle manner. So we just get enamored by that. We get conditioned by that. Then we lose the real meaning of life. We don't even understand why do I exist. We don't know what is the purpose of my existence. We don't know how to actually be happy when we really want that. So then we remain just like anyone else, and one day death comes. That is the end of the story. So before that happens, we must know our own life, our own self, and engage in this spiritual practice, learn from the sadhus, from the scriptures, because that is for our own benefit. It's not going to benefit anyone else but to you. It's like when you eat, you benefit from that. So like that you get spiritual knowledge, you practice, it is your benefit. So that is what I wanted to say. If anybody has any question to ask.
Can you go a little more in depth with sadhana concept?
So sadhana is different type of sadhana according to the path you follow. Basically there are three types of paths. One is called the path of karma, which is called karma yoga. Other is the path of knowledge, which is called jnana yoga. And third is the path of devotion or love, which is called bhakti yoga. So you have karmendriya, right? Working senses. How many are there? 5 of them. So therefore there is karma yoga. You have jnanendriya, cognitive senses, senses by which you acquire knowledge, right? How many are there? 5. Right? 5, 5. Yeah, 5 this side, 5 this side. So therefore you have jnana yoga. And then beyond that you have heart. You also want to love. So there is bhakti yoga. So out of these 3 yogas, bhakti yoga is the best. Because no matter what you have, what you do, ultimately what is important is your heart. What is important is love. If you have everything and you don't have love in your life, then you feel empty. If I say I will fulfill all your desires, except you will have no love, no relationship with any human being, no pets to love. So you will say, I don't want such life. But people are willing to live with love even if they don't have anything else. You can survive only with love even if you don't have anything else. But to live without love, if you have everything else, you don't want. So therefore Bhakti Yoga is the supreme yoga. And this is what is propagated by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. He says this, when he explained Ashtanga Yoga and Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, then he says, Yogi Nam api sarvesham madgate nantaratmana shraddhavan bhajte yamam same yukta tamamata. He says that of all the yogis, Yogi Nam api sarvesham, sarvesham means all types. Who is the best yogi? He says one who is performing devotion to me, to God, he is the best. This is his definite opinion. Therefore in Bhagavad Gita in the end also, when he closes his instruction, then he tells Arjuna that now I tell you the secret. Sarva guhya tamam bhuya shunu me paramam vacha. That I tell you the most secret knowledge because you are my friend. So he gives the secret. What does he say? Manmana bhavmad bhakta madhyaji mam namaskaru mamai vashti satyamte pratijane priyasi. Says you become my devotee. Fix your mind on me, worship me, bow down to me, you will come to me because you are very dear to me. So his instruction is for devotion. And this devotion, this love is the highest principle of life. Anywhere. Even relations. You may have your children, your siblings. Those relations exist as long as there is a love. If your children don't love you, then you say, okay, get out from here. If your wife does not love you, then leave. So real relationship is not blood relation. Real relationship is relationship of love. So Krishna showed this in his own life. He was born to Vasudeva and Devaki in Mathura, but he moved to Vrindavan with Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj. And he is known as Yashodanandan, son of Yashoda, and he was born to Devaki. So to show that love is superior to every relation, and love is the real relation. So this is the path of bhakti. So on the path of bhakti, and on every path, the first is that you have to have faith, as I said. That comes by the association, by hearing. By hearing, by asking questions, you clear your doubts, then your faith becomes strong. And then you take to the practice. So practice you have to learn from the teacher. So you get a teacher, then teacher will teach you both theory and practice. It's like if you want to cook, then you have to learn how to cook and then you have to actually do it. If you simply know how to cook but don't cook, you will still starve, as much as one who does not know. So you also have to do the cooking. So therefore, spirituality has got two parts to it. One is theory, another is practice. So there is a philosophical part and then there is a practice, religious section of it. So in bhakti you have teacher, then you take mantra, diksha from that. You start your worship, your chanting of mantra, offer your food to God. So basic principle is that we are part of God. We are not independent. And we are suffering because we are efforting to be independent. We are doing something unnatural. So it does not fly. Because you are not independent. So even if you work, even if you are a nice person, you are well behaved, but you don't accept God, then still you are in trouble. It's like you go to a company. You are not hired by the company. You go there and you work very nicely. Don't expect a salary at the end of the month. Company is not going to pay you. So first you have to be hired by the company. You have to become a recognized employee of the company. Then you work, you get paid for it. So at present we are not recognized. Because we don't recognize God, God also does not recognize us. He says, you do your thing, I do my thing. I am playing my flute, you sing your song. So when you sing your song, he says you are responsible for that. You are responsible for your karma. I am not responsible. But if you sing with him, then he says, I take the responsibility. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshishyami ma suci. It makes sense. If you are employee of a company and the company sends you on some work and some accident happens, then the company pays for that. Right? Because they have taken your responsibility. If you remain independent and you meet an accident, you pay for it. You cannot go to some company and says, please pay for me. Why? So therefore bhakti begins when you accept a teacher who is a representative of God. And then the teacher teaches you the sadhana, what is to be done, what is not to be done. But every path has that. So bhakti has its own process. And the main thing is that we surrender to God. Surrendering to God does not mean that you leave your house and family and children and then go and live in some temple. Surrendering is in the mind. So you have to understand. And this surrendering is not something unnatural and real. The fact is that this universe is under the control of God. No matter how much you deny it, the fact is that it is under His control. Also, we cannot prove that it is not under His control. But scriptures say it, and there are people who have realization of this fact. But contrary to that, we have no experience, no proof. So we are part of God, we are within the realm of God's kingdom. So we have to recognize this, that is path of bhakti. And to act independently try to enjoy the fruit of your action, that is karma. So then you have responsibility for that. Otherwise God, He personally takes responsibility.
Babaji, you made a statement earlier that peace is not created. Peace is the absence of all these disturbances which are caused by desire.
Right.
And it's almost as if we're saying that we should become desireless.
Yes. So what is the problem with that? What have you gained from these desires?
The problem is that even to go into bhakti yoga, or even to to accept your views, there need to be a desire.
Yeah, so that is spiritual desire.
Yeah.
You have to give up material desires. You
Yes.
have to give up material goals, material plans, because you are not a material person. You are a spiritual being. Body is material. So material desires are only for the material body. If you analyze your desires, they are only for material body. But this body you are going to leave one day. You are not going to take it with you. So you are working for that which you are going to drop one day. Actually you are not going to drop, it will be dropped without your sanction.
Yeah.
Nobody is going to come and ask you that now you have to drop the body, it will be dropped. So whatever you are doing now and whatever you have done till today, it is only for this body. But you are a spiritual being. So do something for that. So therefore when I say having no desire means material desires, you have to have spiritual desires. But body is useful because this is our instrument at present. So it's like you have a car. So car is useful. You have to keep it fit. Yesterday we had Subhas Bhai, his car was not working, so everybody has to then get around it to fix it. So that is needed, but to work only for car, to make your whole life running around the car, that I have to make sure the car is functioning properly. At night you don't sleep in your room, but you sleep next to the car, and nobody should touch this. And then you are meditating only on the car. So that is wastage of your life. So body we have to keep fit, we have to feed it, we have to take care of it, but not that this is the be all and end all of our life.
Can you say something about seva?
Seva and bhakti, they are same thing. So seva, of course, you can do to society, you can do to your children. Everybody is doing seva, right? You work in an office, you say, I am serving there. So everybody does service. Because everybody by nature is a servant. Nobody is a master. We think we are master, but actually you are servant. Even if you are boss in your company, you are still a servant. Big politicians also, they win election only by saying I am your servant. Right? If they say I am master, nobody will vote for them. So even they have to fool people to get their post. So seva and devotion are same things. Only thing is that the seva should be done to God. And when I say seva has to be done to God, then immediately question comes, okay, what about my family, what about my society? Then I should not do seva to them. No, you have to do seva to them, but you have to consider that they are also part of God. Nothing is independent of God. The problem comes when you think you are independent and your children are independent and your country is independent and society is independent. So then it becomes karma. So the difference between karma and seva is this. Because when you do it for some benefit, you want something out of it. Even if you want some name, you want some praise, you are looking for some return. So that is karma. That's why Krishna says that even karma you do niskam karma. Karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. And in bhakti we do it without any such motive, but only for pleasure of Krishna, for pleasure of God. So that is seva. So this is the difference between seva and karma. So karma we do for our benefit. Seva we do for the benefit of the person whom we serve. And bhakti we do, bhakti means seva for God. So sometimes we say seva, sometimes we say bhakti. So bhakti is also seva, but it is seva to God. Seva could be any other seva. So seva everybody has to do. Nobody can avoid. Because nobody is master. Nobody can be master. So if we have to do seva, then why not do to the Supreme Person? Right? People want to take job, and if they have an option that you can go to a small company, and you have option that you can also get job in some very famous, well-established company, so which one will you choose? Naturally choose the big one, the established one, well-known. So similarly you have to do seva, so why not do to the established one, the popular one? Why not do it to the God, the Supreme? So that is intelligence. That is the use of intelligence. So therefore those who take to Bhakti Marga, path of devotion, they are most intelligent. So they are serving the Supreme. They are serving the best person. Why settle for less? If I have to serve, then I serve the best person. And the person who actually does not exploit anybody. You serve anyone else, they tend to exploit you. So God is not going to exploit you because He has no need to exploit. So that's why Krishna says that now I tell you confidential thing. Because why he says confidential? Because if he simply says like nothing, well, he's just trying to fix someone to serve him. He says, no, because you are my friend, therefore I am revealing this to you. Otherwise he does not need it. He already said it in 3rd chapter. He says, na vaptam avaptavyam vartaya vicha karma. He says, I have nothing to achieve. Yet I work for the welfare of others. So God is working, although He has no need to work. He is serving, although He has no need. So we also learn from His example. Yadiyad acharati shreshtas tattvadev vitrojana. Like I said, that we become influenced by others. So that's why God comes to show by His own example, so that we become influenced by seeing Him. That He was also working, He was not sitting or meditating. Krishna did not leave life and retire into forest or something. There are other great personalities like Buddha. He gave up his wife, children, family, kingdom. Then he took to meditation. So Krishna, he did not advocate such process. He said, you can stay wherever you are. And he says, you can do karma sannyas, you can do karma yoga. He says, no, these two karma yoga is better. Tayostu karma sannyasat karma yoga vishishyate. Ekam yogam cha sankhyam cha. So no difference. Because giving up physically is difficult for people. Not everybody can do that. So he says, no need. You can attain perfection. Karmanaya hi samsiddhim asthita jankaya. Even great kings like Janaka, they attained perfection while doing their duty. But one has to be sincere about it. One has to know it properly First thing is knowing it properly. Because if you don't have proper knowledge, then we cannot expect that you are going to practice properly. So first, there should be a clear understanding. And then you practice. So knowledge therefore is important, and it is for this reason that God comes and gives knowledge. But even after He comes and gives, nobody is taking it. Hardly few people. Most people. And then we blame God. He says, if God is there, why there is so much suffering? As if God is propagating it. It is not His job to make you suffer. You suffer because of your own actions. You don't listen to Him. Then what can you do? Father can provide everything for the son, but son says, no, I want to be independent. Why shall I take from you? So he says, okay, you take, be independent, and then he is wandering here and there. So then you cannot blame father. Then some people say, look, he is such a rich person, but his son is wandering on the street begging. But that's not father's problem. Son does not want. So Krishna is giving us knowledge, He is giving us guidance, but we don't take it. Then we cannot blame Him. Why people suffer? They suffer because of their own karma. If you want to end your suffering, then take to Bhakti Yoga. Very simple. And he is declaring it. I am Tvam Sarvapapabhyo Mokshashyami. Says, I will deliver you from all difficulties, from all problems. What more can he say? Father is saying, you come to me, I will solve all your problems, but you don't want to go. Then what can he do? It's like there is a food in front of you, you are starving, I say eat, but you don't want to eat. Then you say, well, I am starving, why don't you do something? So you don't expect me to push food into your mouth. You have to eat. So food he has given in the form of Bhagavad Gita. But we don't take. We have many other books to read. We have many other websites to surf. But we have no time for Bhagavad Gita. So then there is nothing, no one can help you. Otherwise, why people cannot read Bhagavad Gita? Everybody says, well, I have no time. Okay? You are so busy.
You got time to suffer, but you got no time to find a solution.
They don't know that they're suffering.
This is the problem actually. I mean, they don't even know that they are suffering, and they don't know that, even if they come to know, they don't know that there is a solution for it. They find the solution also within suffering. So they find a solution which leads to another suffering, and then a solution which leads to another suffering, and this continues.
Raj, I got a question for you. What to talk of outside India, just within India, there's so much confusion. Everyone's saying we following the scripture. Everyone's saying we are the saintly, our path is right. But yet you go from one organization, one institute, one path, and for a person who's quite neophyte, they just get confused. How come everyone is claiming to follow the right path, but everyone's prescribing a different methodology?
Because they don't read. So claiming is, anybody can claim, and you will claim, if you are following your path, you will claim that is the best. But to actually do a comparative study and then claim, that is different. So how many people actually study? If you want to claim that your path is best, then you study the other paths and then do a comparative study and then prove that yours is best. So that they don't do. Claiming anybody can do. It doesn't cost anything. All you have to say is my path is best. You should follow my path. So obviously you want to say that because if your path is not the best, then natural question comes, why you are not following the best? Because we want to be the best. So nobody wants to think that I am not the best and I am not following the best path. But whether it is true or not, that depends how much time and energy you have put to understand this and to come to this conclusion. So whether your conclusion is actually based on some study or you just say it. So most people are just talking like that. They don't study even their own path properly. But to speak of studying other paths. So nobody, it is a hard work, you have to do some hard work. You spend so much time studying so many other things, but you don't spend time to study even the process you follow. So it is not just a matter of claim and then blame others, but to actually go through the scriptures and understand. So all this analysis is already done in brief in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna has touched upon all these points. He has spoken of Sankhya Yoga, he has spoken of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, Raj Yoga. All this he has spoken. And then he is giving the conclusion. So who can give the better conclusion than him? But we don't trust him also. We have too much faith in our own intelligence. But okay, you have faith in your own intelligence, but then use it properly. Use your intelligence to discriminate. Don't just follow blindly. So most people, they just follow it because others are following. So it is that herd mentality. When you see somebody, so many people are following it, so they must be right. Because it is democracy. If many people follow, it must be right. But that does not work in spirituality. Even in democracy it does not work. Even a person who gets voted, majority of people vote, doesn't mean that he is the best candidate. Sometimes people don't know whom to vote. They just get influenced. So whom are you voting for? Oh, maybe I will also vote for him. Because who is taking time actually to study each participant and then see who is the best.
What would you say if somebody is neutral to all religions and don't side with any particular religion?
So neutral to all religion means what?
Well, I mean, I accept what you say, and accept what Jesus is saying.
Which means that you don't accept anything. Because if you accept what I am saying, then you cannot accept what he is saying. Because I am already saying that bhakti is best. So accepting all means you accept nothing. Neutral to all religions means that you don't accept anything. And you just do what you are doing. And because you don't want to accept anything, and you don't want to upset anybody, you say I am neutral to everyone. Simple. It's just a word, but actually all it means is that I am not into anything. That's what people actually do. It's very common. You say all religions are equal. How they are equal? Have you studied them? No. Just a statement. As he says, people claim my religion is best. So some people claim my religion is best, some people say all religions are same. There is no difference. So these are just statements made by people who don't want to do anything. It's just a mind trick to avoid not following anything and at the same time not feel guilty. So you don't want to feel guilty that you are not following anything, and at the same time you don't want to follow anything. So then the solution for that is everything is same. So what I am doing is also same. But everything is not same. If everything was same, what was the need for so many things to exist?
What was the need for one religion trying to convert a person through the religion if all religions were the same?
So there certain things are common. It's like you are all human beings, right? So we say we are all human beings. We are all same. So we are as human beings, as a class we are same, but we are all individual, we are all different from each other. Even brothers, they have difference. Even twins are not exactly the same. So no two things are exactly same in this world. Because everybody has got different nature, karma. So how they can be exactly same? So all religions are not same. There are many things which may be common in them. But every religion has got some speciality. Every path has got some speciality. So that needs little effort to know that, to understand it. But to say everything is same, that doesn't need much. That's the easiest statement to make.
So I have a question.
Yes.
The Atma, when the body dies, when the body is gone, the Atma keeps coming back, am I right, in different forms, in
No,
different lives?
Atma takes different bodies after. If you die, then you take another birth.
Right,
Jatasya hi dhruvam mritu dhruvam janma mritasya cha.
right. Now does the Atma choose where they want to go?
No, it is your karma which leads you to next birth. There is no choice. Choice is now. You get your birth according to your karma. So at that time it's not that it's like supermarket, I choose I want this body or I want that body. Like you go to a shop, you want to buy a dress. Body is like a dress, right? Body is like a dress for the Atma. So you go to the market, you buy. So how you buy? You buy according to your pocket. You may feel like buying some very expensive dress, but you may not have the money to buy it. So you get what you pay for. And now this life, this is the time you are earning. So at the time of death, whatever you have earned, with that you will buy your next body. So choice is not at that time.
Okay, that answers the question of the body, but say if you are coming into a human form again, do you choose your parents as to where you're going or anything like that?
No, I already answered. You don't choose, you are given according to your karma.
So the family as well?
Yes,
the
everything.
Family in which you go in.
Family, even your gender, even color of your eye, the type of hair you have, where you will be born, which parents, which country, when you grow up, all these things they are chosen by your previous action. So at the time of death is no choice. Choice is you have already made what you have done. That decides. It's not that I want this parents and I don't want that parent. Nobody is going to ask you which parent you want. You are just given birth.
Is there a thing as a hell and a heaven?
Hell means suffering. Heaven means material pleasure. So it is there.
Beyond life.
Beyond life, what is there? There is no such thing as beyond life.
When you die?
There is still
After
life.
death.
You don't die.
Like people say, when you die, you go to hell. When you die, you go to heaven.
Now also you are in heaven and hell.
Yeah, I believe in life there is, when it's good, it's heaven. When there's bad, it's hell. But people say when you die, you go to hell, you go to heaven. Isn't
Yeah,
it
there is, that also is there. But important thing is now. also place heaven and hell, but the reality is that heaven and hell is here. That is more important than after death. Because now you have to perform your sadhana going through this life. That is just again result of karma. You don't have choice in that. According to karma you get it. But now you have the choice to do good or bad karma, or practice yoga, practice spirituality. Then you don't practice spirituality in heaven or hell. Then you just get the result, and then you again come back. So, Mr. So, thank you for coming.